Matt, you look cold.
I'm in an unusually cold spot of Chile Hills for some reason. It means either my insulation is really good or really poor.
Back in just a second, Ron.
We are recording and webcasting live, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Vera, do you need to be moved over?
Yes, please. I don't see the chair yet, but why don't I go ahead and start with the housekeeping remarks, if you don't mind? Mayor
Matt,
McKellen.
before we get started, Ron, can you move Board Member Rodriguez over as well, please?
He's being moved over.
I see the chair on the other side. If you could bring Councilmember Buscaino over. And while we're doing that, I'll start with the housekeeping remarks. So good afternoon. It is 11:59. It's good morning still. Thank you for participating in our remote meeting for the Technology Committee. We'll do our best to facilitate a smooth public meeting, so we ask for your patience as we navigate through this. During the meeting, all participants on Zoom, except for the board members and staff, will be placed on mute. This means you will not be able to mute or unmute yourselves manually, but for each agenda item, the chair will announce public comment. For those on Zoom, if you would like to make public comment, please click on the raise hand button at the bottom right hand of your screen. This will signal that you want to make comments and you'll be added to the list. If you're on your smartphone, please tap the raise hand button at the bottom of the screen. And if you're calling in, please dial *9 on the keypad, which will signal that you would like to make a public comment. As we are used to on these Zoom meetings, if you would like to make public comment, we still expect the same norms of public decorum. So please adhere to the speaker time limit. We ask you to follow the guidelines for treating people with civility, courtesy, and respect. If you cannot follow those guidelines, you will be removed from the meeting. And with that, Chairman Buscaino, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Matt. Good afternoon and welcome to our Technology Committee. Today is December 18th. If we can call the roll, please.
Supervisor Bartlett. She's not here yet. Board Member Krakow.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem McCallum.
I'm here.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Here.
And Councilmember Buscaino.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Cedillo. Appreciate you. Okay, so with that, members, let's turn to item number 1 on today's agenda.
Mr. Chair,
For the record, yes.
I have a disclosure on that item.
Mr. McCallum, go ahead.
For agenda item 1, I do not have a financial interest, but I am required to identify for the record that I am an alternate board member for Omnitrans, which is involved in this matter.
Thank you so much. And I believe we have a recusal for a member.
And Chairman, I have to announce also, I have no conflict of interest, but I need to disclose for the record that I'm a member of the California Air Resources Board, which is involved in this agenda item. And that also is true of agenda item 3 on our calendar this morning.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Any other disclosures or recusals?
Yes, Mr. Chair, on the recusal, Krakow. I have a recusal from participation in agenda item 1 because of financial interest in California Waste Services, Kirk Tasmesian DBA Aero Disposal, NASA Services, Universal Waste Systems, which are materially affected by this item. So I'll be recusing today on item 1.
Thank you, Mr. Krakow. Let's turn off his camera. Thank you very much. He has left the committee meeting for item number 1. Okay, Ms. White, the floor is yours.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Chair Buscaino, you also have a recusal for item number 1.
Oh,
It is.
I was not aware of that.
Oh, it's for clean energy, which is listed on table 5.
Okay. To our general counsel, can you just send me the script for that, please?
Sure. Or I can say it for you if you prefer.
Please do. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Sure. So Councilmember Buscaino will be recusing himself from agenda item number 1 because of a campaign contribution from Clean Energy within the past 12 months.
Thank you. So with that recusal, I'll turn over to Ms. Mitchell to lead on item number 1.
We're receiving some feedback.
All right, and then you will remove Mr. Buscaino from the screen, from our room. All right, we will go ahead now with a report on this agenda item from Vicki White. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. This item involves recommending awards for the year 22 Carl Moyer program, the Surplus Off-Road Opt-in NOx program, also known as the SOON provision, the Rule 2202 Air Quality Investment Program, the Funding Agricultural Replacement Measures for Emission Reductions, also known as FARMER, and the Community Air Protection Program. This item also involves recognizing funds from CARB for the Community Air Protection Program, amending a contract, and reimbursing the general fund for administrative costs related to the CAPP program. In March of this year, the board approved release of a program announcement for the year 22 of the Carl Moyer program. Hard to believe we've been at this 22 years with the Moyer program. So we are celebrating that. In addition to the Carl Moyer program funding, other funding sources are available for mobile source projects submitted through this year's Carl Moyer program. These include CAPP incentive funds, Rule 2202 Air Quality Investment Program funds, and the Farmer program. Please note this solicitation was heavily oversubscribed with funding requests totaling more than $200 million, with about $83 million in available funds. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, I'll remember to say that, thank you. For this year's Carl Moyer program, staff conducted outreach to AB 617 communities in addition to the regular outreach for the Moyer program. However, due to pandemic restrictions, in-person workshops were canceled and replaced with virtual presentations. Staff provided program information at community steering committee meetings held virtually, and staff also coordinated with the ports to provide funding information to drayage truck owners and operators, dealers, and terminal operators. And we also sent over 16,000 subscribers and included warehouse facilities and conducted enhanced outreach to agricultural entities and associations in the Coachella Valley. Next slide, please. In June of this year, South Coast AQMD received and executed a grant for year 3 CAPP incentive funds. This grant was subsequently amended by CARB with additional funds. The total grant for the current year Community Air Protection Incentive Funds is $79.4 million. Under the CAPP Incentives grant, eligible mobile source projects include those submitted through the Carl Moyer program. In order to receive the additional CAPP funds, an amended resolution is required and must be submitted to CARB as part of the disbursement request to receive these funds. Next slide, please. Another funding source that is available for mobile source projects submitted through this year's Carl Moyer program is the Rule 2202 Air Quality Investment Program. The AQIP is a compliance option for employers subject to Rule 2202. Employers participating in the AQIP invest a certain amount per employee, and these funds are then used for projects that will reduce an equivalent amount of emissions. About $4.8 million in Rule 2202 AQIP funds are available for eligible projects submitted through this year's Carl Moyer program. Next slide, please. The total funding available for mobile source projects submitted through this year's Carl Moyer program include our regular Carl Moyer project funds totaling about $33.9 million, interest funds of about $1 million, South Coast AQMD's require match funds of about $4.6 million, about 4.8 million from the Rule 2202 AQIP program, about $11,000 in farmer funds, and about 37.7 million in CAPP incentive funds. Please note that the CAPP incentive funds shown here are only about 51% of the total grant. For the remaining funds, South Coast AQMD is working with the community steering committees to finalize an investment strategy and develop project plans as needed. Next slide, please. The staff proposal is to make awards to mobile source projects meeting the requirements of each grant program, including Carl Moyer and Soon programs, Rule 2202 AQIP, Farmer, and CAPP incentives. Staff is also seeking board approval to allow the executive officer to redistribute funds between funding sources as needed in order to meet incentive program and liquidation requirements. Next slide, please. Staff is proposing to fund projects on a backup list in the event of any fall-through projects or if additional funds become available. Staff proposes to amend a contract with Green Paradigm for the continued technical assistance with implementation of the Carl Moyer program. And finally, to reimburse the general fund for administrative costs relative to the additional community air protection funds we will be receiving. Next slide, please. As I mentioned previously, this year's Carl Moyer program was heavily oversubscribed with funding requests far exceeding the amount of available funds. Due to the requirements in the grants that are intended to maximize benefits to disadvantaged and low-income communities and the oversubscription in funding requests, staff prioritized those projects that were located in disadvantaged and low-income communities. The program funding requirements for disadvantaged communities include, for the Carl Moyer program, there is a requirement that staff must spend at least 50% of the funds on projects in disadvantaged communities. For the CAPP incentives, we have two targets that must be achieved. At least 72% of the funds must be used for projects in disadvantaged communities, and at least 80% of the funds for projects in AB 1550 communities. AB 1550 is a legislation that defines not only disadvantaged communities, in addition to that, it includes low-income communities and low-income communities within a 5-mile radius of a disadvantaged community. All projects were evaluated based on the latest version of the Carl Moyer program guidelines, which were approved in April 2017. Next slide, please. For the CAPP incentive fund, staff identified all eligible mobile source projects located in the AB 617 communities, and with community steering committee support is recommending awards for these projects, which will provide direct emission reduction benefits, contribute to SERP emission reduction targets, and include trucks that are operated a majority of time in these communities. These projects total about $37.7 million. For the remaining CAPP funds, staff will continue working with the community steering committees to finalize an investment strategy. Next slide, please. For the Carl Moyer, Soon, Rule 2202 AQIP, and Farmer programs, the following criteria was used for funding consideration. The project must meet requirements in the Carl Moyer program guidelines. Due to the grant requirements related to disadvantaged communities, we identify projects in other disadvantaged and low-income communities. Staff is also recommending projects that will achieve near-term NOx reductions in support of the AQMP. And the most cost-effective projects meeting the above criteria were prioritized. For Rule 2202 AQIP, these funds were allocated proportional to the contribution level of employers within each county, which is required by the Rule 2202 guideline requirements. And then all remaining projects were placed on a backup list in cost effectiveness order. Therefore, next slide, please. Therefore, for the different funding sources involved, the proposed awards totals are shown here. The total recommended awards for mobile source projects received through this year's Carl Moyer program is about 82.9 million. Next slide, please. This table identifies the NOx and PM emission reduction benefits associated with the proposed awards. Please note all projects recommended for awards are expected to provide direct benefits to disadvantaged and low-income communities. Next slide, please. So in summary, the recommended action items are adopt an amended resolution to receive the additional CAPP funds, which brings the total grant award up to about 80 million in fiscal year 2019-20 CAPP incentive funds. Authorize the chairman to execute awards for the Carl Moyer SUM provisions totaling about 39.6 million from the following sources of funds, including 33.9 million from our Carl Moyer program fund, about 1 million in interest funds, and 4.6 million from the Carl Moyer AB 923 fund, which is our required match for the program. Execute contracts up to about 4.8 million from the Rule 2202 AQIP fund, and execute off-road agricultural contracts up to about 711,000, including farmer funds from this year, as well as about 5,000 in return funds from the previous year. Next slide, please. We are also recommending executing contracts from projects on a backup list should any return funds become available or additional funds from any of the funding sources identified in the board letter. We're proposing to amend a contract with Green Paradigm Consulting for their continued technical assistance with implementation of the Carl Moyer program, and authorizing the EO to redistribute source of funds within or between the funding sources identified here in order to meet program and liquidation requirements. Next slide, please. And finally, we're proposing to reimburse the general fund for administrative costs that are related to the additional year 3 CAPP funds that were recently granted by CARB. This concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
You're muted, Judy.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry. Yeah, are there any questions for Vicky on the report?
I have a question or two, if I might.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Help me understand why San Bernardino, et cetera, in the CAPP has only 429,259, whereas which is one of the most heavily impacted areas for air quality, and one of the most impacted from a disadvantaged community standpoint, compared to 18 million to Long Beach area and 13 million to East Coachella Valley.
And I can start with that, Mayor McCallum. This is Matt. So it's a good question. The way the awards were made were based on the Moyer applications, right? So we went out with our annual Moyer solicitation. We received applications and requests for funds. And based on those applications, we applied the criterion for Moyer CAPP funds and what have you. And then we are recommending those awards. So they were, and at the same time, we did solicit input from each of the communities, the CSCs, while the solicitation was open. So we're awarding based on the net that we cast and what was available. It's not to say that these are the most deserving for other projects. It's just that what we had vis-a-vis applications. Now, that being said, there is an additional 34 million on the CAPP funds that are available that we have committed to work with each of the communities to identify projects within those regions to reduce emissions in each of those AB 617 communities. So I guess a short way of saying it is those funding amounts are based on the applications that were received under the Moyer program.
And why didn't we receive more applications? Did we not outreach to them or what?
We thought we did, but as we heard from all the 617 communities, we need to do a better job with that. And so that's what we are committed to do. I might also point out that as we look at previous awards to each of the communities, there was a better distribution than what is shown here for each of the different communities. So it's not that they're getting only that amount based on the totality of all the awards. But as we move forward, as I mentioned, there is still a large amount of funds from the Community Air Protection Program that we have committed to work with the community to try to address their immediate concerns.
Thank you.
Hello. Yes, go ahead, Supervisor Bartlett.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. So in looking at this program, and I know this is a really significant program for AQMD, but also for the people that apply and the entities that apply. But on a similar line to Mayor McCallum, looking at the program in and of itself, and I know it's based on applicants that actually put in a request for funding, but I just want to take a moment to kind of bring up a concern of project funding equity, also with regard to the various geographic areas within the basin. As it stands, a significant focus is placed within a disadvantaged community. And I understand the intent is to focus on certain areas where we're required to have a certain percentage of funding going to these communities by statute or virtue of the funding requirements. But it appears that there's too much of a focus on that at this point. And I think we need to be a little bit more broad-based. And additionally, many of the proposed projects are mobile sources of emissions, thus providing emphasis on the physical location of the applicant, whether it be a disadvantaged community, which may seem inappropriate or incomplete as it is in reality. These assets sometimes move around throughout the basin. So I think we need to start taking those things into consideration relative to the project awards. Looking at areas where projects operate and their region and basin wide impact. So I'd like to request that in the next round of funding, which we know will come in the March timeframe, that staff come back with a more equitable breakdown of project funding where appropriate, and to take into account applicants that have applied in the past funding cycles, but have been denied based on their actual physical location. So in looking at a broad-based request of things, I know that several applicants have put in requests and they've been denied over and over again based on some rigid requirements or standards that we have at AQMD. So I think staff knows kind of what we're driving at with Mayor McCallum and myself, looking at a more broad-based approach to things. And if staff could take it into consideration, I think that we would all really appreciate it as board members. Thank you.
Thank you. Could staff respond to Supervisor Bartlett on those issues?
Sure. Thank you, Supervisor. This is Matt again. I'm happy to respond. So we appreciate those comments. One of the things that we've been arguing with ARB on for at least the CAPP incentive funds is the way they're qualifying priority projects and DACs based on domiciled zip codes, which we agree that is not an appropriate metric, or it is not the only appropriate metric, I should say.
Right.
We agree with you that these are mobile assets. They move around. Emissions then are spread throughout the region. And so we are working with them on not using only domiciled zip codes for trucks, but we will include marine vessels as well, because if they're offshore DAC, the emissions are certainly going into those communities. So that is one thing that we are starting to work on and have committed to do to try to broaden the criterion for a disadvantaged community. The second thing I always add is that because some of these, as you'd mentioned, these funding programs do have somewhat rigid requirements, is that we look for other funding opportunities that are outside of that may allow us to fund not only in DACs or have a higher percentage in disadvantaged communities. So we're also committed to do that. The third thing that I would offer, or the third and fourth thing that I would offer is that we would look at or take your suggestion into consideration, in that not only that we come back with that program to look at more equitable distribution among the 4 counties, but take into account the highest cost-effective projects, and also take into account if applicants have been denied on previous occasions, that we move those to the top of the priority list. And with that, what we would recommend is that for this round, we would apply that criteria and put that on the backup list. We typically have 10 to 30% fall through. And so there is a high likelihood that those high cost-effective projects will indeed get funded. So we would amend the board letter to include some of those projects on this backup list.
Okay, thank you. I just really appreciate staff taking all of that into consideration, because I think we were taking too of a narrow approach before and excluding a number of really great applicants out there that have applied time and time again, but yet have been denied in the process. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Rodriguez, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to go on the record expressing support of my colleagues' comments, in particular the remarks from Supervisor Bartlett. I think really outlined a very well thought out scope, and it's gratifying to hear that you guys are already looking to adjust consideration in the future. But I don't know if the comments in particular by the supervisor is that going to be considered direction, or do we need to more formalize those thoughts in a motion? Just wanting to get a sense of how we're going to.
We're able to move forward under the considerations, Mayor Pro Tem, in terms of how we're proceeding. And I think Matt's suggestion with regards to, in essence, looking at the list in case projects fall through is a more immediate way of addressing that.
Okay, well, again, just wanted to also express my my support of that direction as outlined by the supervisor and Mayor Pro Tem McAllen. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I have a couple of comments on the report as well. I note from the kinds of projects that are getting funded here that the vast majority of them are off-road projects or marine projects. There are relatively few on-road projects. And of course, one of our main goals here in the South Coast Basin is to turn over our dirty diesel trucks into cleaner technologies. So I wonder if staff could comment on that and why we think that we're apparently not getting applications for on-road projects, or I think we would see more of them on your list. So maybe staff, would you be able to comment on that and talk to us about why that is happening?
Thank you, Mayor Mitchell. And I'm going to start, and then I'll have staff provide more of the specifics so Naveen and Vicky can jump in. There are some on-road projects, as you mentioned. Those are listed under Table 5 under the CAPP incentives, but you're right. And this is something that you heard at the ARB board about the onerous nature of some of the incentive programs, which I think you would agree is that they are not as straightforward as, say, HVIP or Prop 1B, where it's essentially cash on the hood for a model year truck. So we believe that that could be part of the reason. I think another implication is that there are two or three competing funding sources that are going on that some of the more savvy fleet operators are waiting for. So there's a Proposition 1B funding solicitation that's currently open, which offers $100,000 for a near zero natural gas truck or $200,000 for a zero emission. So many are taking advantage of that, we hope. We're pushing folks into that for the pre-2010 drayage trucks. There's a VW solicitation for zero emission drayage. We've been oversubscribed, but there will be another opportunity in the next year. So folks that are waiting for a zero emission opportunity may be waiting for that, because that does give additional funding. And then there was the hope for HVIP to open back up that would give additional funds. And so there are strings attached with Moyer, which for HVIP, for example, that doesn't require scrapping. So I think fleet operators were looking to see what's the most equitable or the best, least challenging opportunity for them to purchase a new truck. So I think that's part of the reason. I don't know if Naveen or Vicky, you have additional insight.
Matt, I think you covered it well. The only other area that I can think of adding to this is really the reporting process that can be that can have an applicant tied in for multiple years under Carl Moyer. That also does not exist under HVIP and some of the other programs. So.
But let me add, Mayor Mitchell, the good news is that we currently have a list of all pre-2010 drayage trucks that are on the drayage truck registry at the ports that we are targeting outreach for the Prop 1B solicitation. So we know who the operators are, what model year the trucks are, and we're actually going to them individually and saying there is now an opportunity for you to change over your truck. We're working with the ports and their clean truck program or their clean truck outreach center. We are working with Clean Energy, SoCal Gas, and even we recently have a contact with Southern California Edison to try to reach folks that want to get into zero emission trucks. So there are multiple entities now that are really focused on how do we get the largest turnover possible.
So another part of that discussion, which has been thrown around a little bit, is the requirement for scrappage under Carl Moyer. And I understand that in the early days of the Carl Moyer program, scrappage was not required. And that it is an issue that can be changed through the CARB regulations. CARB, of course, has not gone there because, I haven't really brought it up much at CARB myself. But, and one reason, as I understand for that, was that SIP credit is given under the scrappage requirement. And so there is that hanging out there that people don't want to let go of. But I think we might in the future, when I'm not around anymore, take a look at that program and maybe work with CARB and EPA on that scrappage requirement and how much value is actually the SIP credit. It may not be as valuable as some people are thinking. We might get more value out of dropping a scrappage requirement and just getting cleaner trucks, cleaner replacements on the road. So just something to think about for our future existence.
We agree with you, and it sounds like you have a very well-informed board consultant that knows about the history of the South Coast AQMD and the Moyer program. So we have high hopes for Board Member Krakoff on his role at ARB, and I think that's a good point.
Yes, I do have a well-informed board assistant on these issues. So,
if you don't mind, I think it's important to mention we're working through the CAPCOA Grants Committee to make a change to the on-road chapter in the Carl Moyer program guidelines. And some of those changes, specifically the one you mentioned, to remove the scrappage requirement for low NOx and zero emission trucks, we're trying to work through the Grants Committee to get that done.
Good. Okay. Work is underway. All right. Okay, now are there any more questions or discussion on the agenda item? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, there's two public comments.
We got two public commenters.
Two public comments. Thank you for reminding me. And let me see. We will take the first one. You will have 3 minutes. And who are we going to be hearing from?
Donna.
Donna.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hello. My name is Donna Kales, and I'm the co-owner of Dana Wharf Sport Fishing and Whale Watching. We have been in business in Dana Point, California in Orange County since 1971. I want to comment on the current grants awarded for this Carl Moyer program round. We have two projects that we requested funding for, and both projects have been denied in this funding round. In fact, we are not even on the alternate list. One of our projects was also denied in last year's funding cycle, And we were told that we would be a priority this year as we were an alternate last year. And due to the fact that we are not considered a disadvantaged or low income community, we did not get off that alternate list. And we were number one, we were told, on that list. It's very perplexing to us because although we do not operate in a zip code that receive many funding projects, many of our customers and those that we serve with donated trips, etc., are residents of those zip codes. We take thousands of children fishing each year from those areas. And without funding, we may find ourselves out of business. This is how dire the situation is. We meet all the criteria to receive funding, except the zip code location. And we have received funding in years past, and we are very, very grateful for those funds. This year, as a small business that is struggling with the impacts of the coronavirus, these funds are more needed than ever before, and they are critical to our future. We would like you to reconsider and add us to the alternate list, and perhaps going forward, make Orange County a priority to receive some percentage amount of funding that is available. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for your comments. And our next speaker is a call-in user. Go ahead.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes.
All right. Good afternoon, board members. Good afternoon, Madam Chair Mitchell and other board members. My name is Ranji George. As a way of introduction, I worked 30 years in the Technology Advancement Office, and I had a privilege and opportunity to present a lot of projects to the board. And I appreciate Ms. White's presentation, especially the comment that 20 years, or over 20 years, Carl Moyer has been in operation. And, you know, it's good to hear those funds being used to promote air quality. But let's face it, 95% or even more has gone to natural gas. And of course, it has a role to play. But now we are getting into a situation of greenhouse gases, and it seems scientists are becoming very uncomfortable with natural gas. And so I would recommend, board, that we try to at least meet two goals, greenhouse gas and criteria polluted, by requiring this natural gas to be at least renewable natural gas. And it could be already. I apologize if I missed that, but it was not in the board letter at all. I would appreciate that. We just simply cannot continue to rely on fossil fuel going forward. So I urge you that should be a requirement, and it will be coming down from the California state. I hope we do it before they require us. Number one. Number two is very little money has gone to zero emission technologies last 20 years. Billions have gone for natural gas, but almost zero for battery, and even less for hydrogen fuel cells. So I hope the policymakers, and many of you are policymakers, will push for a change so that at least 30 or 40% will be reserved for ZEB going forward. And of that, equal proportion for battery and hydrogen. I, of course, will ask for higher percentage for hydrogen, given the extraordinary benefits of hydrogen. So I just request that you consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. George. And our next speaker is Mr. Michael Wrench. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, that's very correct. I'm an applicant second year in a row for a marine repower for the Betio. I run out of Marina Del Rey. I don't see our name on the funding list on the incentive table. I just want to say that we do fish the same area as the San Pedro boats that have been funded. So if you could take that into consideration, we would appreciate the funding for one engine for the boat Betio. Our application number is, project number is 22 CMP 143. We've been repowered twice. We appreciate that. It's kept us up to date, and we appreciate that. So I appreciate your consideration on this matter too, on our pending application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wrench. Our next speaker is Mr. Ken Frank. Go ahead, Mr. Frank.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Ken Franke, President of the Sport Fishing Association of California. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. SAC is a nonprofit organization whose membership includes the majority of the commercial passenger fishing vessels in Southern California. First, we applaud all your efforts to reduce emissions. And many of our members have participated, as Ms. Kayla said, in your programs in years past with major success. My purpose for speaking to you today is due to a concern shared by many of our board members that significant projects to reduce emissions outside of a disadvantaged zip code are not being funded. These vessels are the only mechanism serving people of lower economic and disadvantaged communities to access the ocean. With Harborcraft rulemaking on the horizon that may result in removal of vessels from service, grant monies are critical to achieve emissions reductions while ensuring the vessels remain in business to serve those communities. As a point of information, the vessels in all of these harbors depart their docks and in many cases fish right next to each other in the ocean. Looking forward, we strongly recommend consideration as a high priority that funding be dedicated for other sport fishing vessel companies in areas in these local community ports. This includes pieces of machinery that are tier 0 in which a huge emissions reduction can be reached. Thank you all for your service and thank you for your time. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Franke. And next we have a phone number ending in 2871. Go ahead, please. Go ahead, please. You're unmuted. You need to unmute yourself. Not hearing anyone. Maybe we'll go on to the next speaker and come back to this individual. The next speaker is Don Brockman. Mr. Brockman, go ahead. We will unmute your microphone. Mr. Brockman, go ahead. We're not hearing you.
Do I need to start over?
Yes, please. Now we can hear you.
Now we can hear you. Yes.
Okay, so my name is Don Brockman. I own 5 charter boats out of Davies Locker, Newport Beach, and Newport Landing, California. And I also, they call me ACDC because I have a couple of commercial squid vessels. Those squid vessels have an address, a business address, 400 Main Street, Newport Beach. But they have received funding the last 2 years because we give them an address in San Pedro. Now, our business address is in one place, but yet where we leave the dock is in San Pedro. So we have gotten funded. We now own a boat that has 40-year-old engines that is tier 0 engines, that is the highest polluter engines there are, that operate out of Newport Beach. We get our bait from the San Pedro Bait Company. We fish the same areas as all of them, and we're being denied when here you have tier 0 engines that are polluting and taking place. I know this is a hard situation, but as Ken Franke said, as it states right now in 2023, we will not be able to operate. And in this economic time with COVID and everything else that's going on, we can't afford to outlay $200,000 or $300,000 to replace those engines and still continue to operate. And so, you know, we're kind of under the gun, but it's, you know, it's everyone. I know that the last 2 or 3 years, nobody outside of a San Pedro dock, and we don't want to break the law and say we have a dock in San Pedro when that's not where our business is. So, and whatever you call them, the contractors, you talk to the contractors, they won't even write a boat anywhere unless it's got a San Pedro dock now, because they're tired of wasting their time. So it's pretty public knowledge that you've got to have a San Pedro or Long Beach address. That's all I got to say. Thank you very much and appreciate hearing you.
Thank you, Mr. Brockman. And let's return to the speaker with the numbers 2871 and see if we can get him tuned into our meeting here. Go ahead, Mr. Caller of 2871. To unmute, yeah, we will unmute you, but I think he's off now. I see he's disappeared. Okay. Sorry, we didn't get to hear from him. We'll return to our regular panel members and I'm going to ask for a motion on the matter in front of us.
I'll move the item, Madam Chair. McCallum.
Bartlett, second.
Thank you, Mayor McCallum and Supervisor Bartlett. May we have a roll call, please?
Supervisor Bartlett?
Yes.
Mayor McCallum?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez?
Yes.
And that's it. No, I'm missing. Sorry. Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, I apologize. Item passes 4 ayes and 2 recusals.
Okay, good. And let's ask our committee members who had to recuse themselves to come back in, if Ron could handle that. And I'll turn the meeting back over to our chair, Joe Buscaino.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. With that, colleagues, let's turn to item number 2. If we can read that item into the record.
Go ahead, Fan.
Good afternoon. My name is Fan Xu. This item is to transfer funds and amend contract for the electric commercial lawn and garden equipment program. Next slide, please. For people who are not familiar with this program, this exchange program provides a financial incentive to commercial gardeners and other eligible equipment owners to turn in their old gasoline or diesel-powered equipment and purchase zero-emission battery electric models at a discounted price. This program is funded through EPA's Targeted Airshed Grant and South Coast AQMD's Air Quality Investment Fund. The program initially was approved to provide a 50% discount of the value price the participating manufacturers agreed to offer. 1 year after the inception of the program, another 25% discount, also known as plus-up discount, was introduced to increase program participation. That increased the equipment discount to 75%. Next slide, please. A variety of battery electric equipment is offered by this program through the partnership with 6 manufacturers. Among those equipment types, leaf blowers are the most popular one, being replaced and receive the most funding. Lawnmowers are the second most funded equipment. Since the inception of this program, about 4,800 pieces of equipment have been exchanged for zero-emission models. More than half of them were funded through the plus-up discount. The program continues receiving high interest from the public for most of the eligible equipment. Staff is currently extending the contracts with the manufacturers, except for Golden Eagle. Golden Eagle provides similar types of equipment as others, but it has been in no activity in the past year. Next slide, please. To continue the plus-up discount, staff have identified additional funding is needed. Therefore, staff propose to increase the funding for the program in an amount not to exceed $350,000 using the Air Quality Investment Fund, Fund 27. Staff also proposed to amend the contracts with the remaining manufacturers to provide additional funding for the plus-up discount. Staff will continue to prioritize allocating the funding in the disadvantaged community through coordinated outreach efforts. Next slide, please. The action items are to transfer funds from Fund 27 to Fund 17, the Advanced Technology Outreach and Education Fund, and to authorize the executive officer to amend the contracts with those 5 manufacturers. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Fan. Any questions, colleagues? Let me see, any hands raised.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I do.
Yeah, Mr. McCallum, go ahead.
Thank you. What is the selection criteria for those that apply?
So this is based on the eligibility of the, basically this program is for commercial gardeners and landscapers. And also we, schools, school district and universities, as well as other non-profit agencies can apply for this funding.
So they just have to scrap an older piece of equipment, Mayor.
So what is the outreach that we do to get these people to apply?
So we have a few channels. We have worked with outside vendors to send out advertisement to different communities, especially to the disadvantaged communities. And we also have advertisement on Southern California Edison's Marketplace. It's an online advertisement.
Well, harking back to our last item, commercial gardeners and landscapers can operate in disadvantaged communities, but have business located somewhere else. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration when I understand for schools and for local governments and nonprofits, the selection criteria for a disadvantaged community, but for commercial gardeners and landscapers, it needs to be a little broader, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so far in terms of the equipment, we have replaced about 70% of the equipment coming from the, the business owners in the disadvantaged communities.
But Mayor, it is first come, first serve, and there isn't a requirement that they be a DAC. It is based on just demand.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, let's turn to public comment on item number 2. I believe we have Ranji George has his hand raised.
Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, sir.
Right. Thank you, Chair Buscano and staff. Thank you for that presentation. As a way of introduction, I am Ranji George. I worked at AQMD. I work on batteries and fuel cells. And we had the honor of introducing batteries, technology generally, and fuel cells later in the 1990s. And we are very glad that at least battery technologies have come a long way since then. And this is a clear example where batteries can play a role. And thank you for your support for that. But as you know, there is another technology as good and gives all the benefits of batteries and even higher, and that's hydrogen. And I forming a nonprofit calling Coalition for Advanced ZEF because it's really frustrating that policymakers have not recognized the tremendous benefits of hydrogen fuel cells. For example, in this very field of garden mower, surely hydrogen can make mowers go longer and they don't have to refuel as much and can refuel within minutes. And of course, all those details have to be worked out how to do that. But let's have some demonstration project. We started with a lot of pilot demonstration projects and we succeeded to move it along. So I urge the board members to provide direction to staff to create, work with manufacturers to bring all these technologies, but using hydrogen. And it'll take time. There'll be ups and downs, but please start that process again so that at least 20 or 30 years, it took that long, we'll have some technologies on the road. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Any other member of the public like to speak on item number 2? Please come forward. I don't see any other hands raised. Okay, we'll close public comment on item 2. With that, let's take a roll call on item 2, please.
I'll move the item.
Thank you. That's a good start. Thanks, Judy. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Bartlett,
Yes.
Board Member Krakoff,
Yes.
Mayor McCallum,
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez,
Yes.
and Councilmember Buscaino.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Adillo. With that, let's turn to item 3, members. I believe May Wang will take over the presentation. Ms. Wang, you on?
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. This item is recognize an award and execute contracts to demonstrate and develop capture and control system for oil tankers. Next slide, please. So a few months ago, Air Resource Board approved updated berth regulations, which expand to cover tankers and auto carriers to further reduce emissions from ocean-going vessel at berth. So tankers and auto carrier will have to comply with updated at berth regulation when they call Port of LA and Long Beach by 2025 and all other California port by 2027. So the following month in September, ARB released a solicitation to solicit capture and control system proposals, which once the system is certified can be used to comply the at berth regulations. So staff teamed up with staff engineering and submitted a proposal to Air Resource Board in November, and we were awarded $10 million for this project. Next slide, please. So this project is to design, develop, and demonstrate a barge-based capture and control system, which consists of a self-propelled spot barge. On the barge, there's a exhaust capture system, which will connect to the auxiliary and the boiler exhaust, and the exhaust gas will be treated by the purification unit, which is expected to achieve at least 90% emission reduction of a NOx, PM2.5, and ROC. Part of this demonstration is also to demonstrate carbon captures, which will capture the CO2 emissions from the exhaust gas. Next slide, please. The power system for the barge and the capture and control system include renewable diesel and hydrogen fuel. Also on the barge is a solar panel, hydrogen fuel cell, as well as a battery storage. Part of this proposal is to obtain an ARB executive order, and also the project will be demonstrated at the solar terminal, which located in Port of Long Beach, a disadvantaged community, also neighboring city of our Wilmington, which is year 1617 communities. Next slide, please. So the proposed project cost is $12.8 million. 74% of the project cost will be from ARB's award. Stack Engineering will provide $2.3 million of the project cost share, and both ports are committed to provide the cost share up to 5.2%, and there will be approval. AQMD's cost share will be $333,000. Next slide, please. So the recommended actions are recognize a $10 million from Air Resource Board, $666,000 from the ports into our clean shipping technology demonstration special revenue funds. Also transfer our portion of cost share from Fund 27 to Fund 83, as well as a temporary loan from Fund 27 of $9.5 million into Fund 83 to execute contracts until we receive funding from ARB and the ports. Also to execute a $10.5 million contract of stack engineering for this demonstration and MOU of the ports for their project cost share, and reimburse our general fund up to $500,000 for the administrative costs needed to implement these projects. With that, conclude my presentations. Be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wang. Members, questions on item number 3, rather.
Mr. Chair? Krakoff.
I see Mr. Krakoff and then followed by Ms. Bartlett.
First, I don't know if maybe I missed it, but on the item before, want to thank Mike Cacciati, board member Cacciati is such an evangelist for
yes, so true.
This cleaner landscaping equipment. I got a feeling he was listening in the audience on the phone, perhaps for number 2. So didn't want to forget all his efforts and all his passion for that particular issue, and hopefully it's just going to continue to grow in acceptance. This is on this one, number 3. Mr. Chair, I know you have a lot of experience, in this community representing the ports. So really curious about your thoughts on this. But I'm wondering if we have anybody from the ports or from Tesoro today to talk about this one.
To staff, Matt, I believe we have a few folks on the call here wishing to speak on the item, unless we have any members of either the Port of Los Angeles for Long Beach.
Heather Tomley is from the Port of Long Beach. She's on the speaker list.
Ms. Tomley, can we patch her in, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Heather, you may need to unmute.
So can Heather unmute herself, or do we have to patch her in, guys?
Oh, sorry. I thought I was unmuted. This is Heather Tomley. I'm Managing Director for Planning and Environmental Affairs for the Port.
Thank you so much for joining us.
So I wanted to address the item. We've been supportive of these alternative at-birth technologies for many years. We've been engaged in a lot of different demonstrations working with our shipping lines and terminal operators on ways that we can utilize these types of technologies to get emission reductions from vessels when shore power is not an option. And we've participated in a lot of different demonstrations over the years. So we've been in discussions with the staff at AQMD. We've had some discussions through our technology advancement program effort about this proposal in particular. I do want to identify, however, that we'd like a little bit more time to discuss this with staff about the specific proposal and to identify the details around the proposal, the shipping lines that will be involved with this. We've not had the opportunity yet to be able to discuss this project and this proposal in particular with our Board of Harbor Commissioners. And so we don't have official approval for the cost share that was identified. But like I said, we do have interest in these technologies and we've been supportive over the years. We would just like a little bit more time to discuss this with staff. And if possible, we'd like to request that this item be deferred to next month's meeting so that we can hold those discussions in the meantime.
Chairman, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, I lost my screen. Sorry about that. Mr. Krakoff, any questions for the port?
No, excited about this and very interesting technology. And I'm curious as to what staff's response is to Ms. Tomley's request, but very much appreciate her being here and very hopeful that once we iron some stuff out, that this is something we can all move forward on and invest in together.
Appreciate that. Ms. Bartlett, and we'll have staff respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a really unique item, and I've always been tremendously supportive of it. The bonnet technology is something that is really, I think, very much appropriate for the ports. When I first joined the governing board, I had the opportunity to meet with port officials and actually take tours of the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach to discuss the important emission reduction strategies and the technology, such as these capture systems. And I'd always heard things about the ports in the past from years ago and how, they were dirty and needed to get cleaned up. And I can tell you that when I took the tours of both of the ports, I was so impressed with the level of attention to detail that they've done over the years to really clean up the area, not only from a physical perspective when you walk it, but by implementing a lot of the zero emission technology with the vehicles on site and looking at the emissions and looking at every aspect to really make sure that we have a clean environment, not only for the workers there, but also for the air quality as well. So I give them kudos for that. One question that I have for staff, I know we're establishing the contract that we need to develop this particular barge. Do we have an anticipated project timeline on approximately when the barge could be established and potentially deployed? And I know we've got to work in concert with the ports relative to implementation, but just wanted to get some feedback from staff on timeline. Thank you.
May, go ahead.
Yes, so the barge construction will be about 9 months, but in the meantime that we will do the safety study. So the total project timeline should be about 3 years. We are planning to complete it at the end of 2023, which is ahead of our compliance schedule.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that we have one dock in our ports that supplies shore power to oil tankers. I'd like staff to talk a little bit about that, why we don't have more docks, why there is a need to rely on something like this bonnet technology to meet the requirements of the at-berth rules of CARB.
May, do you want to comment? I can jump in.
So basically for the tanker requirement that we require to reduce emission on both auxiliary engine and the boilers. And the boiler are not configured to take the shore power. Therefore, to further reduce emissions, that you would need this type of system.
So this system should be much more flexible than trying to outfit every possible marine vessel with shore power plugs, as it were. So I think if Heather was still around, she would attest that they need these types of emissions controls to capture the vast majority of different marine vessels.
If I can add to that, based on my observation of these tankers, they are very old. Clearly, they need to be retrofitted. And it's very expensive to do that. And this is a technology that's needed. We, both the San Pedro Bay Port Complex celebrate the fact that we do have alternate marine power opportunities at various docks, and those that are not AMP ready. We have used the bonnet technology. In this case, the fact that we can use the same similar technology for oil tankers, that's something be beneficial to the impacted neighborhoods and communities.
Thank you. And then the bonnet technology has been around for, oh gosh, what, at least 10, maybe 15 years. So is this actually to look at new bonnet technology or to look at new technology for the barge that brings the bonnet to the oil tanker?
Go ahead, May.
So the uniqueness of this project is for the oil tankers, and their safety has been the biggest concern for the oil tanker operator. That's why the very first step for this project is to initiate a safety study, which will be done by American Bureau of Shipping. And along the line, we will incorporate and address all the issues that may happen to incorporate into the barge and the system design.
Because one of the issues has been that the barge itself is an emitter of NOx and other criteria pollutants. So I'm thinking that what I'm looking at here is a way to reduce those emissions from the barge itself.
That's true, Mayor, but I think as Council Member and Chairman Buscaino mentioned, in comparison to the emissions from these other tankers, it probably is not as significant, but that's something that we could talk to a technology provider about.
Just thing to add though, that's why the barge design is using renewable diesel as well as a hydrogen fuel. So we are trying to prevent additional emission from the operations.
Okay, thank you.
If I can add also, is it my understanding, and if Heather's still on the call, she can confirm this, that some of these oil tankers only call to our ports maybe once a year, if that.
Yeah, that's true. I know that that is the case as well. So that that also is one reason why we don't see more shore power for these boats, because they only call rarely, and then it isn't worth the investment to outfit them for shore power. So,
Members,
okay.
if I can, I'd like to ask Matt or staff to respond. There's been a request from the Port of Long Beach to, I want to say, delay or continue this item for 30 days. I just want to know what staff's take on this. Is there an urgency clause attached to this? Are we going to lose these dollars from CARB if we don't approve this item today? I just want to hear from Matt and his team.
Thank you, Chairman. So ARB does have a very tight timeline, which is one of the reasons we were trying to push it forward. Even before we knew we won the award, we had drafted the board letter in hopes that we had a good shot, because there were only a few proposals that we understood. We thought this was superior, and we were correct. We were awarded this $10 million grant. This is not a small grant from the state. They do have a very tight timeline in order to execute the agreement. And I would also add that both ports have provided letters of support in your board authorization, as we do with all of our projects. We're saying it's contingent upon their harbor commissions approving the award. So we're not committing them a priori. We know that they have a process just like we have a process. But one thing I would ask the committee to consider, because these funds may be at risk. We are asking both ports to put in the same amount as we are, the South Coast. We're putting in $333,000. We could amend the proposal that we cover the full amount from both ports and ourselves, which we've done before. And should we come to agreement with them, we would simply not use the remainder of our funds. And that way we would still be able to move forward. We could execute the grant with ARB and have time to work it out with the ports. And we don't lose the opportunity to reduce significant emissions through this project. But that is something the committee could consider.
I appreciate that. Members, if there's any technology that's available today that's going to help reduce emissions in our impacted, disadvantaged communities along the ports of Long Beach in Los Angeles, is something that I'll continue to support and advocate for. I'm concerned about delaying, but at the same time, if we can amend this to get both ports on board pending their commission approval, I would move that, but not at the risk of losing these grant dollars. What are your thoughts, members?
I agree with you on that, Mr. Chair. I know that the timeline is pretty strict according to the ocean-going vessel at berth rule that CARB passed earlier this year, and that I know that some of our people that are dealing with the bonnet technology were not happy with that very fast timeline. So I think it's important that we move forward. We need to do this. These pilot projects to determine the safety of this technology, and I know all of our oil tanker folks out there who talked to me at the time we did this rule we're very interested in learning more about how we can do this safely. And I think it's important that we move ahead. We can amend this later if we need some amendments on it.
Okay.
And I agree with Judy Mitchell on that, and I would, at the appropriate time after public comment, I would move that we do that.
Very good. Very good.
I
Ms.
agree
Bartlett,
as well.
Ms. Bartlett, your hand's still up. Is that from your last comment, or do you have?
Oh,
a-
it's from the last comment,
Okay.
but also I agree with my other colleagues on the board. I think we need to move forward. Losing out on funding would be a travesty, and we want to do everything we can to ensure that this pilot program gets everything it needs to get. Thank you.
Fair enough. Appreciate the feedback and comments, members. Let's now turn to public
Chair.
comment. Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Just trying to clarify if there is a way, maybe, Mr. Chair, you had outlined it at your initial comments, to both ensure that these funds are not jeopardized, but also provide some additional opportunity for dialogue with the ports to address any matters that they deem are still unclear amongst their own group. So is there a way we could do both? Is essentially,
Matt, do we need to memorialize that direction in this item, or?
Yeah, I believe, and I'll ask council to also chime in, but I think the direction from the board would be for us to amend the language such that the South Coast's contribution would be increased by the like amount from the port, so the 666,000. So essentially, the South Coast would be putting in just over $1 million as a, I don't know what the correct language, temporary loan, or maybe we don't even need to say that, but just put in that amount. And should the port's contributions come to fruition, we would not encumber those funds.
Yes, I agree with that. I would not call it a temporary loan. I would just say that the board authorizes, just add the dollar value. The board is authorizing, identify the fund if we can, which I'm assuming
It would be the same fund.
Or Fund 27, I think.
Fund 27.
And then say that that amount can be reduced with a contribution from the ports if
Pending commission approval.
Right, and we've done that before, so we'll find the appropriate language.
Okay, if you can put that together for us as we're listening to public comment, that'll be helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that's it for members. With that, let's turn to public comment on item 3. Caller ending in 436. Please unmute yourself. Followed by Mr. Marquez, followed and then by Mr. Sharp. Okay, caller, you're on.
Hello?
Yes, you're on.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, sorry. I was the 4436 number. Apologies. I didn't realize I had to push *6 as well as my.
All good. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Well, hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian McDonald. I am here representing Marathon Petroleum Corporation. For awareness, Tesoro Logistics is what we would call an indirect majority-owned subsidiary of Marathon Petroleum Corporation. I also wanted to make sure that you guys were aware that 2 other members of our team, Stephen Ernst and Jim Tomlinson, are on the call as well. So we just wanted to provide some comments in support of this. So Marathon is pleased CARB has selected South Coast Air Quality Management District to be awarded its grant. We really hope that it will develop a safe, reliable technology to reduce emissions from tankers at berth. By supporting the development of this technology, our expectation is to provide the team members insight into the operation of tankers and terminals that transport feedstocks and finished fuels into and out of the state every day. We do believe there are challenges that must be overcome to make a capture technology for tankers safe and reliable. Tankers are some of the largest machines in the world, and many years of engineering has gone into their design. Just one example of a design unique to tankers are the onboard control systems that ensure its cargo hull remains inert while a cargo is being loaded and unloaded. Any emission solution must ensure these safety controls, along with others, are not compromised. Tesoro Logistics looks forward to working with May and the South Coast Air Quality Management District to identify solutions here. So I just wanted to thank you again for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Next caller is Mr. Jesse Marquez.
Chair and members of the committee, I'm here to also request a tabling of your approval to move forward for 90 days. So that you know, my organization is approaching 20 years old. We are the leading nonprofit organization in California and the United States on ship emissions and other freight technologies. And so we know what's out there. There are some improprieties going on with AQMD and with CARB that we are now aware of because of the selection. A comment was made that the stacks was a superior technology. We are more than happy to sit down with all of you and go point by point on every aspect of the application and the technology, and we can prove that it is not a superior technology, that the Sol Libre AEG, who is the inventor of the technology, holder of the patents and patent rights, has all the designs, that even information has been provided you by stacks who were former employees of AEG, or AEG's technology. The barge is AEG's technology. AEG owns a barge already, the spud barge. AEG already has Pier 16 to go forward in building it. None of the other companies have all the patents or the patent rights or the assigns to do it. And we had brought it up before AQMD and the CARB to validate they had the rights to even build it, and they do not have those rights or those assigns to do it. There was even litigation pending against some of these companies and employees that should also be investigated. AQMD had already approached AEG months ago to partner in this application. Mei Wang was one of the primary contacts working over here with Ruben and the team to prepare an application, and all of a sudden she went silent. So what we believe is that upper management came into the picture and intervened and stopped AQMD from working with a company that over 15 to 20 environmental justice organizations have supported for over 15 years. We've always supported AQMD moving forward with AEG and ACTI in all of its proposals, and those design is the best. Even if you were to read the two proposals side by side, you can see the long history of ACTI, AEG. They're night and day. And we are preparing a chronological history of all information, all patents, all research. And Tesoro was discussing about the safety. AEG already conducted a preliminary assessment of safety requirements with the U.S. Coast Guard, with the appropriate CFRs, and identified in the proposal what were some of the main concerns.
Okay, next caller. We have Bob Sharp. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. This is Bob Sharp. I'm a founder and president of Stacks Engineering. I kind of obviously disagree with every single point that Mr. Marquez just made. But I grew up in the South Coast in the 60s and 70s in nearby Covina, where I remember my lungs hurting from the smog and having school recesses canceled, and I would frequently end up in the hospital with asthma-related lung issues. The AQMD and California Air Resources Board have done an outstanding job cleaning up the air since then. So I'm always happy to be able to contribute in any way I can to cleaner air. This project will result in a valuable tool to safely reduce pollution from tankers, as well as other regulated vessels and other emission sources. I've worked over 10 years without a salary, developing a variety of a vast number of novel technologies for cost-effectively eliminating emissions from long-life polluting assets, such as ocean-going vessels. I founded Stacks 4 years ago for this purpose, and with the additional goal of solving 1% of climate change by preventing the release of 500 million tons of CO2 per year into the atmosphere as soon as possible before irreversible climate change happens. This project will be a major step toward this goal. 2020 has been quite a challenge. During this time, some serious systemic problems have been exposed. Some have lost faith in the American institutions and wonder if America has lost its way. However, during this project, I have witnessed hardworking people with great integrity within the AQMD, CARB, Tesoro, the Port of LA, and the Port of Long Beach. They are shining examples of institutions that can withstand political tampering, the influence of money and power, EJs for hire, at least so far. These institutions truly represent the disadvantaged, and they assure justice and fairness so that the best ideas win. And I appreciate that. I've had the pleasure of working with the AQMD in the past and during this proposal, and I continue to be impressed with the quality and integrity of the institution. Those who work at AQMD are hardworking and extremely skilled. And a huge call out to Mei Wong, who is an absolute superstar and was able to get this proposal done in a very limited time. The AQMD continues to fight for the health and wellness of everyone who lives in the South Coast. So everyone here at Stacks is looking forward to working with the AQMD on this project. I'm available for further questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mike E., next caller.
Hi there. Can you hear me? Great.
Loud and clear. Thank you, Mike.
Fantastic. My name is Mike Eveloff. I represent Solibre LA. We suggest that the vendor selection be revisited as part of the evaluation that the ports will do, given the written comments that I've submitted. Specifically, we question the sole source designation as it appears to be flawed. There are other issues as well. We suggest that the allocation be allowed, as you have suggested, but the vendor selection be postponed and tabled pending review of these items. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, with that, members, we have fulfilled public comment unless I'm missing any other callers. Mark, you see any other callers on the queue?
There's no other callers.
Okay, thank you so much. So with that, we'll close public comment on item number 3. Do you have a motion, I believe, by Mayor McCallum and a second by Supervisor Bartlett?
Yeah, can I speak to the motion, Chair?
Yes, Mr. Krakoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if I've seen the letter that the last commenter referred to, and a little discouraged to hear Mr. Marquez's concerns as well. I haven't heard those concerns before. I wish that I had before we're voting on this today. I always listen carefully and have known Mr. Marquez for 20 years. I know when Mr. Sharp was talking about EJ for hire, I hope he wasn't referring to Mr. Marquez. That's not been my experience knowing and working with Jesse for 20 years. I guess this also has to go to the board. So perhaps there's going to be additional opportunity to vet some of these issues and work with staff and hopefully get to a little bit clearer of a resolution, particularly from what we also heard from Long Beach earlier today. That being said, Mr. Chair, Councilman Buscaino, I value your instincts on these issues in the community that you represent. I know that you have, relationships with all of the stakeholders as well as the folks at the Port of Long Beach and Port of LA that are supposed to be our financial partners in this. So I'll sort of defer to your judgment on the best way to proceed here. But a little concern about what I'm hearing from the Port of Long Beach, Mr. Marquez and others. I guess the only thing I would say, in addition to what we already know about the motion, is maybe a report back to the committee. Let's say the thing moves forward and AQMD, as I think the motion suggests, is on the hook for all the money. Maybe we can get a report back in 60 days or whatever to see what the port in Long Beach and LA have decided to do. I think it'd be valuable to hear back on that, maybe to the committee. So I don't know if that's a friendly amendment or what that might be, just guidance. But thank you very much. Those are my thoughts on the item.
Thank you, Gideon, for that. I don't see a problem with that report back, and I'll accept that as a friendly amendment on where both respective commissions rather, stand on this item that's before us.
I agree, Mr. Chair, and I agree at the board, between now and the board meeting, we need, I think, a little more information on some of the issues that were just raised.
Okay, that would be the order. With that, then, I'll turn to General Counsel for the verbalizing the amendment on item number 3 before we take the vote.
Councilman, I can do that. So
go ahead, Matt.
On the recommended action, number 2 is the one that is related to the South Coast AQMD cost share. So we would request that we amend that to read transfer up to $1 million for South Coast AQMD's project cost share to be reduced by an amount equivalent to any cost share received from the San Pedro Bay ports. And then the rest would remain the same, and up to $9.5 million as a temporary loan, et cetera, et cetera. So we would change that second recommended action. And then also in the resource impacts table, we would put the South Coast AQMD requested amount of funding to be $1 million.
You're muted.
You're on mute, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, members, are we okay with that? Any questions, comments?
Are you okay with that, Mr. Chair?
Yes, I would move that. Yes. Okay, so I know Mr. McCallum, you want to stand with your initial motion to approve?
Yes, I do, with as the amended by Matt.
And that amendment includes a report back 60 days on the commission, both Port of Long Beach and Los Angeles Commission report.
And some clarity at the board on some of these issues raised.
When it comes before us, I believe it's scheduled for January. Is that my understanding, Matt?
Yes.
Or Wayne? Thank you.
That's correct.
Okay. Do we have a second? I believe that was Ms. Bartlett.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve this motion as amended, this item as amended. Roll call vote, please.
Supervisor Bartlett,
Yes.
Board Member Krakow,
Yes.
Mayor McCallum,
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez,
Yes.
Councilmember Buscaino.
Yes.
Motion passes 6 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Adeo. Okay, with that, members, let's now turn to any other business before this technology committee. Hearing none. Let's turn to general public comment. Any member of the public like to speak on a non-agenda item? Let's look at our participants. We have Mr. Marquez, Jesse Marquez. Please unmute yourself. 3 minutes on a non-agenda item.
Yes, our organization, the Coalition for a Safe Environment, on a regular basis publishes a report, which is a survey of zero emission technologies and emission capture technologies. And we regularly send it to numerous members of the AQMD staff, ARB, as well as EPA. And we'll be coming out with a new edition, next week. And we encourage those members who would like to see an update. We are the ones that publish us this update. Now, it includes all facets of freight transportation. So that includes ships, trains, trucks, and other things of that nature, both public and industrial and private transportation. So I'm just letting you know that we will be releasing a new survey of that information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jesse. Please work with Jacob on my team. Anxious to see that report and appreciate your steadfast advocacy for our communities, particularly in Wilmington. Any other member of the public like to speak on a non-agenda item? Please come forward. Okay, seeing none. With that, members, the desk is cleared. Thank you so much for joining us. Wishing you all blessed Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a blessed New Year. And Ms. Mitchell, we still have you in January, correct?
Yes, you will have me for one more month.
All right. Don't want to miss saying goodbye to recognize all that you've done for us over the years. Okay, with that, members, colleagues, and staff,
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to, I know it's a very difficult time with the COVID right now, and just want to thank Supervisor Bartlett, you, Councilman Buscaino, and all the other elected officials, McCowan, Rodriguez. I know it's a very difficult time, and just thanks for your leadership in keeping our community safe right now. I know a lot is on your shoulders.
Thank you, sir. Really appreciate that. So with that, colleagues, we are now adjourned, and have a good rest of the day and a blessed weekend. Thank you so much.
Everyone, take care.
Thank
Merry
you so
Christmas.
much.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Be safe.
End recording.
I ended it.
Okay, I'll get YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay, hop on to the one.
Now I got to hop on to the dry run for the